Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our final notes of the week, Unit 8, Notes 2-3. So to start off with, we're going to just, again, do a little bit of review of some of those radicals. So when we're breaking down 18, that gets the same as 9 and 2, 3 and 3. So then when I write that out underneath the radical, I have 2 times 3 times 3. So currently, I have a pair of 3's underneath the radical that we could pull out. So we have 2 times 3, and left underneath the radical is just the square root of 2. So then remember, you always need to multiply by that number that's on the outside. So that gives us 6 square root of 2. I'm going to have you guys do number 2 on your own. Okay? Then next, I'm going to go over number 3. So for number 3, we're going to break 28 down to 4 and 7. 2 and 2. So then we have 3, and then square root, we have 2 times 7, and then I have 6 x's. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and find my pairs. I'm going to pull out a pair of 2's, and then I have actually 3 pairs of x's. So on the outside of that radical, I have 3 times 2. Again, don't forget that original guy right there. And then I have 3 x's, and left underneath the radical, I have 7. 3 times 2 is 6. X times x times x is x cubed. And then we have the square root of 7. Okay, so that was just a little bit review. Make sure you do number 2 on your own. All right, let's take a look at this order of operation stuff, okay? So for order of operations, that's what we talked about, how you go about simplifying numbers, okay? There's a certain order in math that we have to do that in. And the same applies to radicals as well. So that's what we need to remember. So the biggest thing is that multiplying and dividing are going to come before addition and subtraction. Okay, so we need to first get our multiplying out of the way and then take care of our adding, or get our dividing out of the way and then take care of our subtraction. Okay, also, this is something I was noticing you guys were doing yesterday. Any two radicals that can be multiplied and divided. So if I have the square root of 6 times the square root of 2, I can combine those, okay? But it has to be the same radical in order to add or subtract it. Now, if you remember yesterday, what I saw was some of you were doing a great job multiplying, and then you got to one where you were adding the square root of 16, I think it was the square root of 6, and a lot of you guys were adding that together. Well, the square root of 16 and the square root of 6 are two different radicals. That would be like saying you could take x plus y and make it xy. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the biggest thing is that if you have two separate radicals, you cannot add them together. This is not a true statement. These two cannot be added together. So really make sure you remember that. Multiplication, yes, you can do that. Addition, not so much. Okay, so let's take a look at just general simplifying. So we have all the tools. Now we're just going to kind of throw it all together in one big hodgepodge today. So first, let's start with this number 1. Okay, so I'm going to simplify by dividing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify each of those radicals. So I have the square root of 18 and the square root of 25. Well, we just did 18 at the top of the page, and we got this. So I have that pair of 3's, so this is the same as 2 times 3 times 3. Take out that pair of 3's, and we get 3 square root of 2. 25 breaks down to 5 and 5. Well, that's going to be a pair. So even though I have 5 times 5 underneath the radical, because everything's in a pair, that's just going to break down to 5. So this then is going to become 3 square root of 2 over 5. Okay, remember, if you think way back to one of the very first note sheets we did this unit, you need to remember that you cannot leave a radical in the denominator. So you cannot have a radical in the denominator. So that is one thing we need to be watching out for today. I'm going to go ahead and have you guys try number 2 on your own. It should work out very similarly to the one I just did. Okay, let's take a look at 3 and 4. Okay, so taking a look at number 3, first thing I want to do is just break down all of my radicals. So I have 54 and I have 75. So 54 I'm going to break down to 6 and 9. That gives me 3 and 3 and 2 and 3. So putting that under a radical, I have 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. I could take out a pair of 3's, and 2 times 3. I'm going to leave that as 2 times 3. Ultimately, at the end, you shouldn't have anything that needs to be multiplied, but let's just hold off on actually multiplying that for 1 second, and you'll see why. Next, let's take a look at 75, which is the same as 25 and 3. That gives me 5 and 5. So underneath this radical, I have 3 times 5 times 5. Take out a pair of 5s, and I'm left with 5 square root of 3. So I'm going to write this as a radical over itself. Okay, so to start off with, I have 3, and again, I'm going to keep it as 2 times 3 underneath the radical, and then on the bottom I have 5 square root of 3. Now remember what I just said, we cannot have radicals on the bottom, which means I need to cancel something out. Well, I notice that there's a radical 3 in this one. Okay, so this really is the same as 3 times radical 2 times radical 3 over 5 radical 3. So I can cancel those out, and I'm left with 3 radical 2 over 5. Again, you don't want to have a radical in the denominator, so that took care of that. And all of these should simplify out. Number 4 should be 200. Okay, so it's not 200 on your note sheet, so go ahead and change that for me. Make sure you write it as 200. So let's take a look at the square root of 126 and the square root of 200. So the square root of 126, I get 63 and 2, 7 and 9, 3 and 3. Again, I'm assuming now that you guys are comfortable enough with simplifying down the radicals itself that I'm going to focus on the more tricky parts here. Okay, so then we end up with 2 times 7. And again, I'm going to leave that as not multiplied. Okay, breaking down 200, I have 2 and 100. 100 breaks down to 10 and 10, 5 and 2, 5 and 2. Then I have 2, 2, 2, 5, 5. Take out any pairs I might have. So then I get 5 times 2 on the outside. Gives me 10. So again, I'm going to come back over here where I did this other one, and I'm going to put those back over themselves. So this one right here was my top. So I have 3 over 2 times 7 divided by 10 over 2. So again, notice how both of these have a square root of 2 involved. So you could take the time to write them as 2 split out radicals, or you could know that if both of them are being multiplied and they're being divided, you can go ahead and cancel those out. And that gives you 3 square root of 7 over 10. Again, you don't want to have a radical in the bottom. Let's take a look at one more, and then I'm going to go ahead and have you guys try it. Okay, so we're going to grab this and bring it on down. Alrighty, so let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, I'm going to have the square root of 24 and the square root of 27. So 24, I'm going to break down quickly for us here. And pull that out. And again, I'm going to leave that as 2 times 3. Same thing with 27. Pull that out. Now I'm going to write it back as a fraction over itself. So that first one is the top. So I'm going to write that as 2 times 3 again. And then that second one is the bottom. Ultimately, in the end, we don't want to leave something as 2 times 3. But when we're worried about canceling things out, that's okay. So I notice that these 2 times, or those square root of 3's are going to cancel. Now I'm only canceling out because they are both underneath the radical. If I have one outside the radical and one inside the radical, that's not going to work out as well. Okay, so only when it's right underneath the radical. So I have 2 times the square root of 2, and then I'm going to divide that by 3. Okay, also you want to be checking to make sure you can't simplify out that fraction. So I'm going to go ahead, I want you guys to try number 6 on your own. So split up those radicals, watch your multiplication, and cross out what's overlapping. Remember, it has to be underneath the radical. Next, let's take a look at some of these multiplying. This is a little bit more in depth than what you guys were doing yesterday. So first, we're just talking about basic distributing. So the first thing I'm going to do for number 7 is I'm just taking that square root of 2 and I'm distributing it. Now, if you think back to yesterday, you remember that if you're multiplying, you multiply things on the outside together and you multiply things underneath together. You don't crisscross. So if I look, there's nothing on the outside being multiplied. So I'm only multiplying things underneath the radical. Well, if it helps you, write it out like this. Actually distribute that 2 out. Okay, so then it kind of looks like some of the problems you were doing yesterday on your homework. If that helps, go ahead and do that. So I see that the 2 and the 8 are both underneath the radical, so I'm going to make that the square root of 16. Next, the 4 is going to stay on the outside because that's the same as having a 1 there. 4 times 1 is 4. Then 2 times 3 is going to give me 6. So the next thing I need to do is do some simplifying. Well, 16 is going to actually break down completely. So you really don't want to forget to fully simplify at the end. So I'm going to have 2 pairs of 2, which is the same as 4. That makes sense. The square root of 16 is 4. Last but not least, we check. Square root of 6 can't be simplified. Okay, there's no pairs, so we're just going to leave that as it is. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 8. So I'm going to take and distribute in this square root of 6. So square root of 6 times square root of 3 plus square root of 6 times 5 square root of 2. So we're going to multiply the outsides. 1 times 1 is 1. 6 times 3 gives me 18. Then that 5 is going to stay there, and then multiply underneath the radical. So now we just want to simplify the radicals that we will have left over. 9 times 2, 3 times 3. So we're going to take out a pair of 3's there, and we're left with 3 radical 2. This is going to be 4 and 3, 2 and 2, so I'm going to take out a pair of 2's. Now don't forget to multiply that 2 by that 5, and that's what gives me 10. Square root of 3. So if that went a little fast for you, pause the video, take a look at it, okay? I do have a lot of stuff I need to cover in these notes, and you're always more than welcome to ask myself or Caleb questions if you're stuck during the note sheet. Okay, let's take a look at number 9. I'm going to get it set up for you, and then I want you to finish it, and then you're going to do number 10 completely on your own. So we're having the square root of 5 times 5 square root of 2 minus the square root of 5 times 4 square root of 8. So I'll do the first term for you. So you're going to take and multiply the coefficients 5, and then 5 times 2 is 10. Here you're going to multiply 4, and then underneath here, 5 times 8 is 40. So I want you to go through and see if you can simplify this one. See if you can simplify that down anymore, and then I'm going to have you guys go ahead and try number 10 on your own. Now, let's take a look at number 11. Now, number 11 is a little bit tricky. Okay, the rest of them are going to be a little bit tricky. So you have to think back to that box method that we used. Some of you prefer FOIL, and that's fine, but I'm going to use the box method. So we're going to use the box method to multiply radicals. And we're just going to multiply into each of the boxes as we did on the box method. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to take 3 times 3, and that's going to go in this box. That's 9. 3 times the square root of 5 is 3 square root of 5. 3 times the negative square root of 5 is negative 3 square root of 5. Here's the tricky part. Negative square root of 5 times square root of 5. When you take the same radical times itself, it's going to give you just what is underneath the radical. So this one right here is going to become negative 5. So let's go ahead and write out the terms that we have. So what you're going to notice is that 3 square root of 5 and that negative 3 square root of 5 are going to cancel out. So we're just left with 9 minus 5, which is 4. So next, I'm going to go ahead and have you guys try number 12 on your own. Okay, let's take a look, last but not least, at number 13, and then I'm going to at least get that set up, and then you guys are going to try number 14 on your own. So again, setting up that box, we have square root of 6, square root of 8, square root of 24, square root of 2. So now I'm multiplying all numbers underneath the radical. Here, square root of 144. Here, square root of 192. Here, square root of 12. Here, square root of 16. Well, first of all, the square root of 144 just gives me 12. So we have the square root of 192, the square root of 12, and the square root of 16 is actually just 4. Okay, so we can go ahead and write that. So the next thing I need to do is simplify 92, which I'm just going to do very quickly here. So then you end up getting 12 plus 8 times the square root of 3. Here you get 4 and 3. And you get plus 2 square root of 3 plus 4. Last but not least, we need to combine our like terms. So all I did there was simplify, and now I'm just adding things that have radicals. So notice I'm adding the things without radicals, and then separately I am adding, 16, this should be 12 plus 4 is 16. Okay, that was good. So I'm only adding things with radicals and things that are just numbers, okay? So I know that went a little quickly. We will practice this a lot. Feel free to show me your note sheet when you're done, and I'll give you the homework. Thanks for listening.